Last night, I took the time to sit and watch The Lion King. Not the remake. I took the red pilled route and stuck with the original. And from the get go, I was blown away with the amazing visuals, the cinematography, the storytelling, the iconic characters. This film is a masterpiece, if only because of the first half. I will be the first to say that I think the first half is far stronger than the second half, but like the first half is like just masterful animation from like up until that point that Simba meets Timon and Pumbaa. It's just phenomenal. And as I get older and as I watch this movie more and more, it's one of those films that you keep coming back to as you age and as you get older, and you keep thinking about it in different ways. As a kid, I think I related more to Simba. In fact, this is one of those films that I saw when I was so young. I honestly don't remember what I thought when I first saw it, or even when I first saw it. It's just been so long. This very well may have been the first Disney movie I ever saw. I don't remember what I thought of Simba as a kid, but I remember like seeing it for the first time. It must have been relating to Simba, like dealing with his father's death, like dealing with this all these issues, dealing with growing up and having responsibilities. And as I've gotten older, I've been thinking about like certain other aspects of the plot, stuff that's not really in focus. And today, the last time I saw it, it was about Mufasa and how great of a father he is to Simba, and how he is just an absolute boss in everything he does. The film does an amazing job of selling Mufasa as this like sort of larger than life father figure, perhaps more than any other fictional character I can name. Right? Like it's kind of impressive. I cannot think of a single father in any medium that I think gets more of an emotional reaction out of me due to being a father than Mufasa. Like Mufasa is just an absolute beast, you could say, a king of beasts, you could say, you might say. Mufasa is awesome, and the last time I saw this movie, this was several years ago. I was explicitly thinking about this. Is this just like how well implemented he is into the plot, and just how deeply emotionally invested you are in it. And that was actually the thing that kind of got the most emotional reaction out of me this time. Like now that I'm even older, seeing Simba, Mufasa look out over the horizon with Simba, like teaching him shit, warning him not to do stuff, like being a parent to him and stuff like that. Like it was just becoming even more and more relatable. And one of the things that I thought when I saw this is like the next time I see this movie, I might have a child of my own, and it's kind of getting kind of exciting to think about that in its own way. And Mufasa is awesome and probably one of my favorite Disney characters ever. Right? Just so many cool moments like in this movie. But this time, I was thinking when I saw the movie, I was thinking a little bit more about Scar and his relationship with Mufasa and just how things reach this point and how Scar is so jealous of his brother's success that he will do anything to seize the throne from him, even outright cold-blooded murder, right? Like Scar is essentially that guy who's given all of this leeway. Mufasa does his best to look after Scar and like give him a certain amount of comfort and like, but Scar kind of spits in his face. Scar kind of is ungrateful to Mufasa and everything does for him. Scar is ungrateful to his brother, the king, and envies his position and envies his place in the circle of life, and is willing, desperately longs to be king himself, to have some, out of just the pure desire for power. There's no other way to look at this. It's like it's very much Again, I keep hating to bring this back to Berserk, but I keep bringing it, I am just reading it a lot. Um, Scar is a lot like Griffith in this regard, where like he thinks of himself as being too good for his position in life, and he will do absolutely anything to achieve his goals. Now, it's not as dark as Berserk, but it doesn't need to be. It gets the point across very, very well, and arguably even more effectively, right? You don't need to be super dark and edgy to be like some sort of memorable, iconic story, right? Like that's one of the things I really want to emphasize. Like, yeah, sure, I like Berserk, but like it doesn't. Darkness doesn't make something deeper or more complex. Is what I'm getting at here. I find plenty of things to respect and love in these kind of like upbeat Disney movies, right? And seeing Simba go from like being this happy-go-lucky kid who, without a care in the world to like losing his father and like going through this like a sort of a self-realization when he has to go back to Pride Rock and like deal with Scar, like that is an engaging story, like told very effectively in a an hour and 25 minutes. Yeah. Now that I'm older, this movie is a lot shorter than a lot of the other movies I've been seeing lately. It's just, I guess I'm reaching that point where I kind of think about that now. I wasn't like super into film when I was younger, so I guess this is just me comparing it to other movies that I really really like. But The Lion King is just like really fast paced. I love it from start. I do like it a lot from start to finish. There's plenty of things to like in that second half, right? Like I do think it's the first half, especially that opening sequence. Holy shit! Like that sequence with like the rising sun and like that African chant. That might be one of my favorite shots in like all of film. Right? It's just so gorgeous. And that song is just amazing. And one of the things I noticed when I was watching the YouTube video for that again after watching the film, the the animals in that are actually drawn somewhat more realistically than the more cartoony, um, typical Disney designs, or the ones that you see later in the film with like Simba and Zazu and stuff like that. Like they actually look like animated animals and they behave like animals, and that's something that like I wanted to see more of. It reminded me almost of Fantasia, which I think a lot of people kind of no one except like really hardcore Disney fans really talk about it anymore. Go out and watch Fantasia, by the way. Watching this sequence really made me want to go back and watch that because that film is just purely majestic, and I think the Lion King that opening, the Circle of Life, really took a lot of influence from some of the iconic imagery in Fantasia. It's just beautiful, beautiful sequence. My favorite song in the movie, actually, one of my favorite songs in all of Disney, probably. I just love the Circle of Life. This wasn't meant to be a complete review, but I was supposed to talk about what I was thinking about while I was watching this, and that was, of course, Scar. Like I wanted to talk about Scar and just how it reminds me of his relationship with Mufasa. Reminds me of the Virgin versus Chad meme, right? Like the Chad Mufasa, has all these lionesses. He has his own kingdom. He has this son that really loves and respects him. He has all these animal subjects. Like, he's beloved by everyone. Like, Mufasa is an absolute Chad. Meanwhile, the Virgin Scar is lurking in a cave nearby, in the dark, napping, spending time with degenerate hyenas, and not really doing anything to really deserve or work towards having his own place in the kingdom of life, in the circle of life. Like all he cares about, all he covets, is the role of king. Like he cannot fathom a reality where he is not the most respected member of the community. And so he takes it out on Mufasa. He takes it out on Chad. Scar is, in essence, the lion equivalent of an incel who just, doesn't get any lioness pussy. He doesn't do anything with his life. He just like sits there and schemes on how best to get rid of Simba and Mufasa. And this is the kind of thing I find interesting about Scar is that like unlike Mufasa, who does not negotiate with the hyenas at all. Scar is actually on very, very good terms with them. He speaks with them and like is willing to work with them on certain stuff and is like promising them stuff for his own gain. But the thing about Scar and the hyenas is that if Scar applied himself, if he just like worked with them and like tried to talk to them about like what they do, their place in the circle of life, and tried to make them sort of find peace with Mufasa. Like they don't need to get along with him exactly, but they don't need to be like so antagonistic, right? They can just sort of have their own territory, maybe sort of be allowed to go into the Pride Lands for finding prey or whatever. I get maybe Scar, if he had like really, really cared about the hyenas, could have done something to resolve the hyena problem. We don't know what the hyena problem is. We don't know what Mufasa's history with them is. Like we don't really know exactly what the issue is here with like Mufasa banishing them and just them living in a graveyard and just all of this stuff. We don't know all the specifics, but like Scar had the capacity, he had the relationship with them, he had the brains to really make something of himself in this very specific situation. Like he could have just, left Pride Rock, told Mufasa like, hey, I don't like living in your shadow, and I want to live my own life. And then like he could have started his own pride that like coexisted with the hyenas. Like of course they don't do that in nature for obvious reasons, obviously. But like I'm just throwing out ideas here. Is it's like that to me is what he should have done in this situation. Is that like he should have thought about his place, what he could have done to be better, right? Like, accept that Mufasa is a better ruler of Pride Rock than him, and sort of like accept that and sort of move past that, and like not just sit in a cave thinking about how much pussy he would be smashing if he was king. And don't I just you cannot tell me, you cannot convince me that Mufasa has not fucked each and every one of those lionesses. Like in that sequence where like they're all sleeping in the cave, like Sarabi, his wife, is like sort of sleeping near him, but like you can sort of see like the sort of the beta lionesses like sleeping nearby, and it's just like it's like a harem situation. It really is. And I just saw that. I just sort of like laughed about it. But that is Scar's motivation. He wants that lifestyle for himself. He wants to be a Chad. And yet, unfortunately, it's never ever gonna happen. Because like here's the thing about incels. Here's the thing about virgins. Here's the thing about like these kind of beta males in general. Is that like they're not betas because of Chad. They're betas because they're betas. Like people still wouldn't like you or respect you even if like there weren't any Chads, right? Like you're just that unlikable and detestable of a personality. Like just look at Scar. Like he treats everyone like shit. Like the only person who treats him with any modicum of respect or dignity is Simba. And it's in that dumbass child way where he doesn't really understand why Scar is such a piece of shit and why he shouldn't be talking to him, right? Like everybody else knows what Scar is like, but Simba is like youthfully naive about Scar's nature as a virgin, right? Like we all have that family member, right? This is another thing I was talking about. Like as a child, you don't really understand. You don't really think about whether or not you like certain family members, right? Like they just sort of exist. And you don't really realize that you don't really like them until much later in life. And I think that's something that's interesting about like Simba's relationship with Scar is that like he kind of he doesn't really understand who Scar is and just sort of treats him as like Uncle Scar and sort of like um, acts the same way and sort of like believes that Scar would treat him the same way when he's alone as he would if like Mufasa was with him, right? Does that make any sense? Like Simba doesn't understand that Scar is a complete incel, right? Well, maybe not. Well, are we just gonna? I don't consider the Lion King 2 canon. I don't think anybody else really does either. That one seems to imply that like Scar got someone, had kids with someone, but that someone isn't in this movie. So yeah, I don't consider that canon. That just needlessly complicates things. I like my theory. I like this idea of just Scar, not really being willing to admit that Mufasa is better than him, and not really understanding why he's not the king, why he doesn't deserve to be king. Like it's not just fate or destiny or like his preordained role in the society. Like it's him being an asshole, right? Like it's him not understanding, not respecting the king, respecting Mufasa, his older brother or his son. Him only really caring about himself. And that's the thing I think kind of sticks out about this whole hyena situation is that like Scar got into power by promising these people, right, these oppressed members of society, that if he were elected king, that he would fix everything for them. He would eliminate the college debt. He would uh, he would guarantee basic income. In this case, food like zebras and stuff like that. He would guarantee food, right? With Mufasa not fucking over the hyenas, like everything would be right. Everything would go well, right? But that's not true. That's not what happens. Like everything goes to complete shit because Scar is terrible. Like Sarabi says this is like that they can't stay at Pride Rock, right? Because the herds have moved on, everything's dried up, there's nothing for them there. But Scar is so steadfast in this idea, on this fantasy of being king. He absolutely refuses to leave. He absolutely refuses to move on. He just sort of like demands that they stay there and die because he is just so fixated on this dream of being a king, and it ends badly for him, right? Like the lionesses turn on him when Simba appears. The hyenas turn on him after he sort of tries to sell them out to Simba, and it just goes to show you that like you cannot really turn your back on society in this way, in this fashion. Like you can't kill Chad and expect to like sort of become Chad in his place. Is what I'm getting at here. Like Scar is a complete loser. Even after becoming king, he's still who he was as when the movie started, right? He's still conniving. He still doesn't give a shit about anything. He's not responsible. He doesn't really care about anyone under him. Like he doesn't understand the circle of life. He doesn't understand like the harsher realities of being king. Like even Simba, you know, I would say, Simba. I think Simba learns this lesson before Mufasa even dies, right? Like when Mufasa gives that lecture about like how kings are only brave when they need to be, right? Like it reminds me a lot like Scar, that could be considered bravery, right? Where Scar just refuses to yield to his fate, where like he sort of like just stays on that rock until like he demands that the people stay on that rock until they starve to death because he simply refuses to listen to like the advice of anyone around him, from like Zazu to Sarabi, who I'm sure Scar has raped once or twice. Uh, uh, just for Shakespeare comparisons, it's just that is Scar. Like this is who he is. Becoming king isn't going to change that. He's not someone who deserves to be in power or have any respect at all, right? Like he's promising these the hyenas free stuff for his own gain, but in the end he sort of tosses them aside when it suits him, sort of like certain political parties. It's just Scar is just a complete disaster, right? Like emotionally, physically, he has nothing going for him at all. And at the end of the day, the reason that is the case is because of him. He refused to change. He refused to accept his place in society. He refused to respect his family, respect their legacy, and cared more about himself than anyone around him. Scar is a complete piece of trash.